Hey, what up? It's me from Hobsquatch again. I've been gone for a long time, but me and the guys have been working on more of the stuff for the mechanics and the lore of the game. The first thing I want to talk about is what we want to do with brain, brawn, and soul. Our brain, brawn, and soul attributes are we were thinking about what if these were going to be derivative or if they were going to directly contribute to something that your character was doing. And me and my other guy that are working on the actual mechanics of the game don't want too many derivative things from brain, brawn, and soul being brought into the game because things can get confusing and muddled, and we want this game to be simple. So he started throwing a bunch of math at me, and I panicked because I'm not good at math. I have a GED and a CDL. Math doesn't go with those two things at all. But he's been working very hard on it, and I've been working very hard on my end just to try to come up with some general ideas of where we want to go with this. The first thing that I wanted to talk about as far as somewhat cemented ideas go is the progression system. The progression system, the way that I want to do it is I want to utilize something that's close to successes and failures literally contributing to the progression of your character somehow. How we're going to do that, we don't totally know, but we are trying to pull ideas from other resources. Some of the resources are things that I'm unfamiliar with, that my other guy Mark is very familiar with, and I'm also trying to pull from some resources that I'm more familiar with that he's not as familiar with. Thing is, I'm dumb and he's smart, so sometimes when I explain things, he already knows what I'm talking about, even if it's something that he's never heard of. But the Dark Eye tackles failures in a way of giving you fate points when you screw up. And you can use that basically to re-roll or do a couple of other things that I can't really think of off the top of my head. And I think that that's a good way to tackle failures, but I also think that that might not be enough as far as character progression goes, because that's not really a progression-based thing. That's more of a way to soothe a failure, which doesn't always need to be done. And he talked to me about a similar system that they used in, I believe it was Warhammer, and I think it might have been called the same thing, Fate Points. And you would use them pretty much for somewhat the same things. So we're thinking about maybe using something of a similar milieu, but we are trying to execute it in a way where it's tied to your character's progression, as opposed to being tied to, oops, I did a bad thing and now I want to fix it. So the way that we want to progress the characters with successes is literally make each success you make go towards some kind of like bolstering boon or something you can give your character, or just direct attribute increases. Maybe it could be increases in skills, which is another area that we're trying to figure out. Skills, talents, things like that. If the skills and talents are even going to be different from one another. Big thing is we're also trying to make it different. So when we're looking at all of these things, these are all tropes that all RPGs have. And we're trying to look at what's there, what's good, and what doesn't need to be fixed, but we're also trying to be conscious of what could be changed to make this game feel different, because that's very important as well. As far as skills go, we're thinking about kind of condensing the list and just tying some generalized things to brain, brawn, and soul, and then possibly giving you special proficiencies that wouldn't really come up unless you took something in this area. And that would be something that the player would sort of suggest to the GM rather than the GM having to say, okay, give me a blah check, or give me an engineering check to see if you can come up with a way to build this trap, or stuff like that. I want that to be more streamlined. I want it to be something that the character knows that they have, because not everybody has some kind of score in it, just they do. So another thing that we were talking about as far as the mechanics of the game were how brain, brawn, and soul were going to work as far as combat and whether we were going to separate that from skills and talents. Skills and talents we're thinking more about dialogue, exploration encounters. If you have anything that's like just regular dialogue or exploration, we were thinking about actually tackling maybe not both of those things this way, but at least dialogue. We were thinking about verbal combat. This isn't something we've cemented in, and it's not something that I'm thinking that we have to do. But I think verbal combat's an interesting idea, and I've seen it actually. I picked up the Witcher RPG from Pandemonium, our local game and hobby shop, and they use a verbal combat system, and I think there's some other RPGs out there that use it as well. The other guy I work with, Mark, he's told me a couple things that I can't remember because my brain is very small. But the verbal combat is basically a way, in my opinion, to get more of the wallflower character as far as playing their character out goes, more into those types of encounters instead of being a murder hobo. And it still feels like something they can put skills into and kind of get into a fight, no matter what kind of dialogue encounter this is. But as far as combat goes, we were also trying to figure out how our brain, brawn, and soul are going to tie into the combat without just being completely derivative of those things. Because these things have to also matter, or these things also matter in accordance to your character's actual skills and abilities in combat, rather than just like their physical stature and how their brain naturally works. A lot of this stuff is trained in the mind and body, and soul would have a big part to play in all types of combat as well. So, like I said, we're just trying to figure out, are things going to be derivative? Is combat going to be separated and its own thing? But if we do it that way, we still have to tie it together in a way that makes some kind of sense. But that's what we're working on as far as mechanics. Every single one of us has been on a bit of a hiatus. Our artist, who's the other guy who's working with me on mechanics as well, the art that he was making for us slowed down a bit, so we may not have as much of that to put towards videos, but we're still going to try to make videos as far as lore goes. We have stuff that's coming out for elves. We have stuff that's coming out for 2 other races that we've added to the game as well that we don't really have names for. But yeah, and aside from that, we've got the humans. I kind of want to save those for last because I think we all know what a human is. It's kind of the POS of all of the races because, hey, look, I'm here, I'm new, I'm young, I'm very, very mortal, and because of that, I want to conquer as many things as I can because I'm a bad guy. That's kind of what humans have been painted as in a lot of RPGs. It's really kind of what humans are today. But going back to mechanics, that's the one thing that we're really trying to work on, and going towards more ideas than that right now, I think, is not going to be something that we're going to be doing too soon. We're going to stick with these ideas and actually try to hammer them out. But I also need to figure out what is it that I need on the paper to run some kind of mock test play to try to see if these things are going to work. Because we've worked out numbers, an average that you should be hitting with the dice, which, by the way, the dice is 3d4s and 1d6. That hasn't changed. So far, it still works pretty well, and we think we've got the target number that we want. We're still doing the roll under system, so to beat the score that you're trying to beat, you have to roll under whatever the target number is, and when you do that, to my understanding, it's commonplace that you're rolling against your character's own skill as opposed to a target number that's always tied to whatever situation you're in. But you'd still have modifiers based off of, oh, well, you tried to jump across the cliff, but you fell because your foot brushed some vines that were growing off of it, or you were in combat and it was foggy, so you get like -1 to perception or whatever. Those things are obviously still going to be a factor, but your target numbers are basically going to be plastered on your character sheet. And I want everybody to know that and see that, and I want it to be kind of a quick reference. Combat should move smooth, it should move somewhat quick. I've heard a lot of people say combat should be quick and easy and fast, and that sounds great, and it would be amazing if it was that way. But if you're new to playing any RPG, no matter how intuitive or easy it is to pick up, it's just not going to be like that. You're going to have questions. You're going to wonder if you're doing the right thing. You're going to forget things that you could do that you just didn't do because you forgot. So the biggest thing we want to hammer home is simplicity and complexity kind of at the same time. And that may not sound like it makes much sense, but what I mean by that is I want there to be options for you to make your character complex, but I don't want it to be complicated. And I've always found that in the simplest RPGs, I actually have the most fun. Like the Dragon Age RPG, I've heard a lot of people say things about it that I didn't necessarily agree with, because it's a simpler sort of, okay, you get your armor bonus that takes away damage, you get 3d6 to roll your stuff, all of the numbers are, pretty small, everything's easy to roll and add up, and the things that I've heard that were bad on it is once you get to later levels, it starts to gum up a bit. But that's, in my opinion, if you're just going by the book. These things are all made for GMs to GM, and I kind of want our book to be the same way. Of course, we need to have the material in there for you to be able to read and be able to make sense out of what's in it. But we are also trying to make something that's easy to make your own stuff out of. So those are the big important things that I wanted to talk about today, and just to let you guys know what exactly we're working on. The things in the mechanics, the brain, brawn, and soul, how it was going to work with combat, possible verbal combat. I wanted to talk about the progression system and how that's going to work. Just to reiterate, it's going to be like a system of successes and failures for now. That stuff I can't say is concreted in yet, because once we get all that on paper and test play it, and we could figure out it doesn't even work, but these are the ideas we're going with right now. But yeah, still 3 D4s and a D6. All that's still good. And catch you guys next time for another mechanics video. See ya! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.